This is Fizz Free. In today's episode, we meet the founder and co-host of Fizz Free, Ruth.
Oh, you made me well up then. I didn't think I'd cry on this podcast, I really didn't.
Ruth's in her mid-30s and a working mother of two in the UK, and she quit drinking in December 2020.
I felt like I had no support whatsoever.
She opens up about her relationship with alcohol, from teens and early adulthood to burning the candle at both ends.
I remember crawling into bed thinking, my God, I'm a rock star.
Juggling a social life, a demanding career, and then parenthood.
I remember going up to read my daughter her bedtime story, and she turned around to me and said, Mum, why are you slurring?
As many people can probably relate, Ruth's relationship with alcohol really changed during the pandemic.
Lockdown lifted slightly and you could go and sit in someone's garden. What do you do when you go and sit in someone's garden and the sun's out? You carry a bottle of wine to their house.
Ruth opens up about how she managed to break free from alcohol with the help of podcasts, exercise and by keeping a journal. She shares a few extracts here.
Oh my gosh, this is the best feeling. I'm not hungover today and I was elated.
Ruth's all about shattering the illusion of alcohol.
Just the emperor isn't wearing any clothes. There are zero benefits to drinking the substance.
Thanks for listening. This is Fizz Free.
It just makes me feel so good to be able to pass this and pay it forward.
Ruth, out of the three of us hosting together, you were the one who got sober first and inspired Claire and myself over time to sort of follow in your footsteps and cheer us along. So you started it all off. What are you going to tell us?
Yeah. I think, firstly, to say that was completely unplanned. It was just one of those things that happened quite naturally. And I think that's what's so wonderful about sobriety is it kind of secretly and quietly engages people and inspires people. And, you know, this journey that I've been on for coming up to 3 years now was never planned. I never ever thought that my life would be alcohol free. I'm going to take you back through my life and give you a bit of an overview of where I started and how I've ended up where I am. When I was a teenager, I did the normal stuff, went through GCSEs, I then progressed to A-levels, and it was probably around GCSE time when I started using a fake ID to get into clubs. Sort of 15 years old, going uptown, and it would be Alco Pops. Never, ever, ever liked them. I don't know if you remember, a bit of nostalgia, but going back to the good old days of Reef and Smirnoff Ice.
They were so sugary.
They were like so disgusting.
Yeah. I never got into them either, you know, never.
No. And do you know what? Back then, and since being on this sober journey, it absolutely resonates with me that the first taste of alcohol you ever have, instinctively, you dislike it. You're like, Oh God, that tastes vile. The science behind that actually is because your body is programmed to reject alcohol. It knows it's a carcinogenic, it knows it's poison, so your body actually rejects it. And it's only over time when you sort of fight with that instinct where you break it down and your brain convinces yourself that you do actually like the taste of it. So because of that, I didn't drink much when I was a teenager. I got through my GCSEs, my A-levels, and even university. Even at that point, I quite often drove if we went out because it just never ever bothered me. I'd much rather know I was getting home safe and didn't have to worry about taxes. And I hated throwing up, which I quite often did when I was doing my degree. If I ever did decide to drink, it would be a complete binge and I would vomit. And I think back then you could cope with it because your hangovers were so short and sharp. I knew if I threw up, I could wake up the next day and be fine. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Completely different now. The real sticky point, I'd say, is when, you know, things did start to change a little bit, was once I finished university. I did a postgraduate degree and I got quite a demanding job. And that's when I started drinking consistently at weekends. I was engaged to be married. I got engaged quite young. I was 21 when I got engaged. So I was going through the process of starting this brand new career, planning a wedding. We had no children, so we were out pretty much Friday, Saturday, and sometimes Sunday. We had no commitments or early mornings that we had to be fresh for. I suppose the binge drinking started then, really, where I'd go out and my sole purpose was to get drunk. It wasn't me thinking I'm going to go out and just enjoy a glass of wine. It was, right, let's have pre-going out drinks. This was with my friends. Let's have, loads of wine. We might have some vodka, some gin or whatever. And then we'll just top ourselves up when we get to the club or whatever.
I've got a friend who's German, and she came to visit me in my early 20s, and she could not get her head around that phrase. She said, wait, you drink to get drunk? And I was like, yeah, baby, yeah. And she just looked she didn't too judgy, but she was so surprised. She just couldn't understand it. She was like, but you drink to get drunk. And she's European, and I think you've touched on the fact that that's a very English culture kind of mindset as well. So I totally identify with that focus. That's the whole point, to go out to get drunk.
Exactly. And I think living in the UK is dangerous in terms of our drinking culture. There's so much marketing around sort of influencing people's choices over alcohol. You go and buy a packet of cigarettes and there's somebody's, a deceased body's lungs on there. You pick up a bottle of wine and there's not somebody passed out who's had their drink spiked and, had really unfortunate things happen to them. It's marketed as this really fun, amazing substance which is going to give you the best time of your life, which is just quite sick when you think about it like that, because when you take away the marketing and you take away the posh bottle, all you're left with is a registered poison, which is just insane.
I had no idea for years how dangerous and how addictive alcohol can be.
Yeah, and I think that's the danger of it, is that, I'm an educated person, as we all are, and I feel tricked, and I genuinely feel like someone's played a complete hypnosis trick on me that I couldn't see, like that illusion. And this has been a huge thing in my sobriety, and shattering that illusion, and I'll talk through how I did that. But it was as if I could see clearly for the first time, and just the emperor isn't wearing any clothes. There are zero benefits to drinking the substance. So back to being in my 20s, I got married at 23, and I didn't really drink much on my hen do, didn't drink much on my wedding. Like, I can remember everything about my day. On honeymoon, again, alcohol wasn't a huge part of my life back then. And then my job got more stressful. I had a promotion really early on, and I started feeling quite stressed to the point I had physical problems. I started having stress lumps form on my head. I was referred for investigations, whether it was bacterial infections or something untoward going on. They couldn't find anything, and it was all down to stress. And that's when it started to creep up, really. I would abstain all week, drink at a weekend. That was my routine. And then Tuesday night wine club started, and it became a bit of a joke with me and my husband, because we were like, well, we've made it to Tuesday, we haven't had anything since Saturday night, so actually we've done all right. This is a midweek circuit breaker. It gets us through to Friday now.
So weeknight wine club was just you two?
Just us two, just having
but with
a
a cute
nice
name.
meal. Yeah, Tuesday night wine club, why not? And it was just a normal thing to do, and I thought, everybody has a drink to unwind and get them through the week, and it was that terminology really, to get you through the week. It's a reward, it's a well done, you've made it to Tuesday, you've got over Monday, which is the hardest day of the week. So I got pregnant at 25, which I completely stopped drinking altogether. had a really nice pregnancy, wonderful birth, and a beautiful baby at the end of it. And I didn't really get back into drinking when I had her, because I fell pregnant with my second child. And after having her, I breastfed her for quite a while. So I pretty much had 3 years out of drinking, which is bizarre when you look back. And I used to think that to myself. I was like, how can I do 3 years? And I'm struggling to do 3 days now.
Yeah, because at that time, though, you were so focused on such massive
Yeah.
commitments and massive challenges and responsibility. I suppose that completely took priority for you.
And do you know what the maddest thing is? It was as if a switch had been flipped. When I was pregnant and breastfeeding, I was like, I have to do this. Someone has told me I cannot drink when I'm pregnant, so I don't drink. It just doesn't even come into my head that I want any. And then because I'm doing it for myself, I was like, oh, well, I haven't got a baby inside me anymore. I'm not feeding. I can actually drink again, and no one's telling me I can't. No one sat me down and said, this isn't good for your health, so crack on.
So that's a few years later.
Yeah, so I'd say when the girls started school, I fell into quite a clique at the school gate, and I became really friendly with some school mums, and things were really hunky-dory. I was on maternity leave at the time, and eventually I'd go back to work. So I had more time on my hands. The group of mums that I fell into a crowd with were really social. We did a lot together. We socialised quite heavily at the weekends. A few of them really enjoyed a drink. They really enjoyed the party social scene. And I kind of got swept up in that. And there was a few nights I was crawling in at 4 a.m.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I remember crawling into bed thinking, my God, I'm a rock star. I have got it all. I've got 2 kids. I've got an amazing husband. And I've just crawled into bed at 4 a.m. because I've been out partying and drinking. And I would literally turn up to children's parties on the Sunday. I remember going to my niece's party, and my cousin, who doesn't drink a lot, was like, you all right? You look a bit rough. And I was like, yeah, I was out till 4. And I wore it like a badge of honour. I was like, check me out. I am still young. Which I technically was. I was only late 20s. And I just felt it was cool. And that sounds so pathetic saying that out loud.
But maybe, after having 2 kids, that's you claiming you time and being who you were before kids. And on some level, that can feel a bit reassuring and give you your identity back a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of it was I was really swept up by this friendship group, and it was all consuming. It becomes quite intense because you're all in the same boat. You've all been, you're either on your second pregnancy and you're going through maternity leave together, and you spend a lot of time in each other's company.
And how many people are you talking here?
There was probably about 7 of us, maybe 8. I can't remember the exact amount. I'd say I was really close to maybe 3 or 4 of them. And it's really difficult for me to talk about, but things went sour. And the reason they went sour was because of a drunken night out. And this particular night, we actually didn't get home till 5 a.m. But it was a massive changing point, and it was that serious that we parted ways. Basically, I lost a friendship group instantly overnight. A few other people were involved, and it completely split the group. And we were a split camp. It was awful.
That can be really unsettling, because they often say that phrase, don't they? It takes a village to raise a child. And if you've all got early motherhood in common as a support network, and then something damages that, then I can imagine that would be really unsettling.
Yeah, it was horrific. It's one of the worst things I've been through. And I think the hardest thing is that it was very cutthroat. It was very, we don't want to hear your side. And I found that difficult to kind of not fight my own corner. And it made me question kind of how I saw myself, really. And it made me feel insecure, and my anxiety went through the roof. You know, I had to face these people every morning, every afternoon, dropping my children off, collecting my children. And it was like a wasp's nest. It was absolutely toxic. And looking back, would have what happened if drink wasn't involved. That's what alcohol does. It leaves gaps in stories, and people fill those gaps. So yeah, that was a real down point for me. And at that point, I was in recovery from quite major surgery. I'd been poorly for quite some time, and had a misdiagnosis for 2 years, which I had to completely battle my way through to get a true diagnosis. And it wasn't until I had my second diagnostic laparoscopy that they found out I had quite a serious ruptured appendix, which I'd been living with for 2 years. So my stomach was in bits, had to have major surgery. So at that point in my life, I was getting over quite an intense medical condition. 2 young kids. I just lost one of my biggest support networks in the friendship group. So yeah, I just felt like my life was falling apart. I was off work, long-term sick, because I'd been so poorly. And yeah, so that was in my 30s, really, early 30s. Me and my husband looked at our lives and was like, right, where do we want things to go? And I was like, well, my job is really demanding. I can't go back into that one at the minute, but I still want to work. I can't be at home all day, every day. My kids are at full-time school. I needed something for me. So I decided to apply for a job which was more of a demotion, really. And I feel that's the turning point, that my drinking got a bit worse, because I didn't have to be firing on all cylinders to go into work. I didn't have to be at the top of my game. I could walk in there half hungover and no one noticed, because I was a bit at the bottom of the pecking order.
I've heard that before on other podcasts, actually, people saying that if you've had a job where there isn't major responsibility, you're not necessarily in the spotlight, then you can pull it off and you can function. And if you're hiding it and thinking that you're functioning, then that can turn into a slippery slope.
And it was like I had no challenge, I had no responsibility. I was doing 3 days a week and I could go in and do the job with my eyes closed. It was just, but I knew that was a stepping stone for me. It was just to build my confidence back up for when I decided to step up again once I sorted it, because at this point I still had lots of investigations going on with my health. So yeah, and then COVID hit. And I'd say at this point I was still moderately drinking, and I know you can't really say what moderate, because moderate for me might be really moderate for someone else or really heavy for someone else, because I think it's all relative. But COVID hit, and I remember thinking, I've got 2 young kids at home, my husband was going to work every day, and I was left trying to homeschool them, trying to keep 2 young people happy and confined. I was very fortunate, I had a garden, so I was really thankful for that. If I'm outside in the sunshine and we had the paddling pool out, it was a bit like a holiday. And I was like, I'm not at work, the sun's out, surely it's wine o'clock. And, you know, those toxic text messages keep going round then, that, you know, you'd get a picture of a glass of wine from one of my best friends saying, it's 12 o'clock somewhere, isn't it? And I'd be like, do you know what, if she's got one, that's a green light for me to go and get one. So off I go into the kitchen. It's 2:30, and I'm like, well, if I was on holiday I'd be having a glass of wine with lunch, so why not? I'll have a glass of wine now.
Don't you think it's amazing how influential something like that can be? Just a little text message or somebody close to you just sharing that as being normal. It's amazing how that can switch you. But also, I think COVID was such a major accelerant for a lot of people's drinking. I don't think that's uncommon, that when the world found itself paralysed and stuck at home, people then got stuck in. But I suppose the trick is, like, at what point, like how far through 2020 does that go, into the point where you think, okay, things are different. I don't still want to be having wine at 2 p.m. or whatever.
And that was the thing for me, like, in a way, COVID was the best thing that ever happened to me in terms of my drinking, because it accelerated so quickly. The only way I can describe it is I felt I was quite in control of my drinking, because prior to COVID, I knew sometimes I drank too much, but I had a switch. If I was out, I knew that tipping point, and I would stop and I would have water. I would get absolutely berated by my friends. Oh my gosh, you're so boring. You're going on water. Come on. And
did we nickname you Two Sip Tina?
I did. I had the nickname Two Sip Tina because people used to say, God, she only, Ruth only has to have one glass and she's gone. And that was me. But slowly my tolerance built up, and that buzz and that kick that I got from that first glass took longer. And it was harder to sustain. And during lockdown, it was very much like there's nothing else to do. It's an escapism. I just needed something to drown my sorrows, because I'm terribly miss my family. I'm really close to my family, and I found it difficult to not see them, and scared for my family. I had my mum and dad who were bleaching all their groceries when it was being delivered from Asda. I was coordinating their Asda deliveries because they were so scared of catching COVID. And then lockdown lifted slightly, and you could go and sit in someone's garden. What do you do when you go and sit in someone's garden and the sun's out? You carry a bottle of wine to their house. And that became a thing then, because I wanted to see my family so badly. We were visiting each other's gardens a lot, and that meant log burners outside, that meant wine. And it became a little bit of a slippery slope. And then lockdown got lifted, we all went back to work. But I didn't change my routine. And this is the point I'm talking about. So if you imagine a little roller coaster where I'm bumping around up and down, and some weeks I'm not drinking much, and then other weeks I've had a bit of a binge and I'm absolutely hanging, and then other weeks I'm all right. COVID, imagine just a really steep drop on the roller coaster. And that's when I felt it was really weird. It was as if I was losing grip. It was as if I knew I was losing control over it. And these were the reasons why I knew my hangovers were getting just horrible, to the point I had anxiety. I would dread if someone texted me to go out, because I'd be like, oh God, I don't want to go out because I know I've got swimming tomorrow with the kids. I can't get up and go swimming. I'm going to be feeling rubbish. Because my hangovers, I used to wake up and my stomach was like someone was doing somersaults in them. I'd feel lethargic, tired, headache. I just feel like I got the weight on my shoulders. It was the main turning point for me as well, was I was fed up of thinking about it. Genuinely, I would get up and go to work, and I'd wake up and think, I'm not going to have one tonight. I am not going to go home and have one. That half a bottle that's still in the fridge, because wine was my absolute crutch. I'm not going to drink that when I get back. I would purposely leave a little bit in a bottle of wine and put that in the fridge, because I'd tell myself, knowing full well it was bullshit, I would tell myself, when you get in, you'll only have that one glass. But you only have the choice over the first glass. As soon as that hits the taste buds, I'll be like, oh, well, that was only a small one. I'll just open the next bottle. It's a complete cycle. And before I know it, pretty much all that bottle would be gone.
And what about your husband during this? Did he mention or notice, or was he just along for the ride, or was it not really discussed?
This is what worried me, because he was along for the ride. My husband's a social drinker. He abstains all week, and then we'll have beer if he goes out on a weekend. If he doesn't go out, he will literally just have a couple of beers watching the football on a Saturday afternoon. But I massively noticed that he was starting to increase his drinking, and little things stick in your head. And I remember the one night, and this is horrible to admit, we had got through 3 bottles of wine So that's 1.5 each. And he put his shoes on to go and get a fourth. I was like, where are you going? He's like, I'm just going to go and get another bottle. And I was like, no, that's too much. We can't. No. My kids are asleep upstairs. If there's an emergency, we couldn't get in a car and take them to A&E.
Yeah, I think you're not alone in that one at all, though, Ruth. I think it doesn't justify it at all, but so many parents, because at that stage of your life you are drinking at home, you're not going out and dressing up and clubbing, you are at home, stress relieving, and as you say, it becomes whether one or both of you is doing that and to what extent, but you were the voice then that said, hang on a minute, on this occasion, let's not.
Yeah, and this is a scary thing, and I think because I grew up in, a family surroundings where drink was normalised. I didn't know anybody who didn't drink, and our Friday nights would be a visit down the local social club, and I would fall asleep on the sofa in the pub. I'd have a piggyback back staggering down the road, and it was just normal. Like, it was just normal to see people getting a bit louder, getting a bit, slurring their speech and whatnot. And I think that's really quite a worrying thing, is that it's those subconscious imprints that go into your brain, which is why I've wanted to turn it around for my children, so they are more aware of what alcohol is, and that actually it's a conscious choice that you should make, an informed, educated choice. So yeah, I looked at my husband that night and I just said, no, we've had enough. And I found we were both more tetchy with the kids. We had a lot less patience with them because we were recovering. We'd wake up in the morning and our bodies were sort of on emergency recovery mode, which takes a lot of energy. But I made some notes to myself when I was going sober, when I decided to, and I wanted to write something down that I would always look back at, and I wanted it to be a shock tactic to say, don't ever go back to how you were.
Notes you made to you, like for yourself and to yourself, to be kept and read. Yeah.
So number 1, and this one gets me every time. You drank nearly a bottle of wine before the girls' swimming class. And I remember that evening so vividly. And it was that classic. I got in from work. There was 1 glass of wine in the fridge. It had been a stressful day. And I thought to myself, do you know what? I'm just going to have one while I'm cooking dinner.
Because that feels quite civilised, right? Like chefs do.
Exactly. So I drank that. And then I thought, do you know what? I've got the taste for it now, because you literally only have the choice over the first glass. Past that, it's the addiction and the alcohol telling you need more. So I opened a bottle and I had a further 2 more glasses, to the point where I said to my husband, I can't drive to swimming now. So my husband drove to swimming, and I remember standing in those changing rooms looking around, and it was 6:30 in the evening. And I remember thinking, no one else in here has had a glass of wine. What, am I the odd one out? No, surely. These have all had a cheeky glass before they've got here. Absolutely. And I was looking around thinking, no, they've literally got in from work and come straight out to take their kids swimming. What is wrong with me? Why have I done that? And I was horrified. Absolutely horrified. So that's my number 1. Number 2, sometimes you would just plan activities so I could drink. Absolutely would. If I was thinking, right, we'll take the girls out for the day, go to a National Trust, tick that off the list. There's a pub on the way home, let's stop there, let's get a drink in. I've put here, you would skip bath times because the wine made you lazy. So again, that would go on to my husband, because he can take his drink better than me, so he would probably be in a better state, so I'd have to get him to sort of chivvy them along. And this one, oh God, this one kills me. And again, vividly remember this. I remember thinking to myself, I can drink and still be the perfect mum. I can still function. And I'd had a couple of wines, and I remember going up to read my daughter her bedtime story, and she turned around to me and said, Mum, why are you slurring? And I was like, oh my God, I'm actually slurring. And she's noticed. She's old enough to notice. And I was like, oh gosh. Number 5, at parties, you'd want to get rid of the kids so you could drink. And I've put here, you selfish git. But I'd be like, right, we're at a party, palm the kids off on somebody else. I want to nurse this bottle of wine. So those were 5 of the things that I thought would really shock me. And then I've just made some little notes about how it actually affected me as a person. So I've put tiredness. You wake up feeling like you haven't slept. Everything is a chore. You feel like a zombie. You can't think straight and your body feels lethargic. Grouchy. Everything annoys you. You have no patience and you shout at people. Guilt. You wake up every morning feeling guilty. You promise yourself you won't drink again tonight. And when you do, you feel like a failure again. You can't just have one. You always think you can have one, but you can't. One leads to a whole bottle. The hangover. You feel sick. Your tummy churns. You have horrible pain and only sugary foods will help. This one's a bit embarrassing, but talking about bowel movements. Obviously it affects your bowel, which is embarrassing. Expensive. Think of the extra nice things you could have instead of wasting your money on booze. It consumes your thoughts. You're looking for excuses and opportunities to drink all the time. It made you stop wanting to make an effort to play with the girls. It made you feel low, massively anxious and depressed at times. Loss of control and memory. Don't need to say more. It's a horrible feeling. Worrying about your health and whether you have a problem all the time. If you worried about it, yes, you do have a problem. So those were my diary notes to myself, and for the first couple of months when I stopped, I read them pretty much every day.
I think that's such an interesting approach, because had that been me, I would have made that list, read it, and then scrunched up and put it in the bin, and then it wouldn't exist and I could carry on doing whatever I want. But for you, you're quite a factual person and you like rules and boundaries to be nice and clear. It sounds like from what you were saying earlier about being pregnant, you can't drink, so that was no issue for you just to take that advice on board. But this sounds like a tool, one of the tools maybe that you were using to talk to yourself and put rules in place for yourself. What other sort of tools did you sort of add to that?
So one of the things I did was I was going for a job, which was a promotion. I was going back into my normal work. And I remember saying to my husband, if I'm going to do this job, I need to be firing on all cylinders. I can't have alcohol in my life. And I woke up on the 14th of December. It was 2020. It was just shortly after the second lockdown finished. And I remember having a glass of wine and I looked at it and I thought, that's the last glass of wine I'm ever going to have. And a lot of people don't have this moment. But I did. I just knew it was the last glass. And I finished it. And I went to bed and I woke up the next day, 15th of December. And I said to my husband, I'm never drinking again. He went, oh, all right. I was like, no, seriously. I got in my car that morning. I Googled podcasts for sobriety. And Craig Beck came up. And I listened to his first podcast on the way to work. And I just knew that was my turning point. He spoke to me so factually. And I know some people find him a bit too harsh and a bit too factual, but I really relate to that.
That suits you, right?
It really suits me. I listened to his first podcast and I was hooked. I could not get enough of the man. I listened to it all the way back. I got home. Every time I did housework, my earphones were in. I binged through his entire podcast within, it was probably a week. And I downloaded his hypnosis script. I listened to that every single night. And I told everyone, which is bizarre because so many people keep it a secret.
And at that time of year, though, you're in party season. You're running up to Christmas. People have got that go ahead, that green light to drink more in December. So that would really go against the grain.
I did it purely for that point. So I thought if I can get through Christmas and New Year without a drink, I can do anything. So, yeah,
And just to go to that bit, so when you say you told people, so you told your husband, you told family on a family link.
Yeah.
And I recall some reaction to this being, be quiet, good for you, kind of uncomfortableness it seemed to generate. I mean, what sort of reaction do you feel like you had?
Horrific. I felt like I had no support whatsoever. Luckily, I'm a very determined person and quite strong-minded, and once I've made my mind up, I do tend to stick to things. And the reason why I told people was knowing my family and knowing my friends. If I gave up, oh my God, I'd have the biggest backlash. They would throw that in my face. And that's partly why I told them, because I thought, I can't have that shame. I can't have that embarrassment that I've failed. It was a risky move, don't get me wrong, but it was definitely the right thing.
You should scroll back and actually find that initial message. I'm sure there was like silence, like tumbleweed for quite some time after you posted some of the... Cause I think you were posting like hard facts and statistics on like the week before Christmas, and nobody really replied. For a bit of time, I was like, oh, shush.
Yeah, because everyone wanted me to go away and like shut up. And, you know, I have had people say to me, oh God, you know, you don't lecture us. And it's not about lecturing, it's more about informing so you can make an informed choice. If I told you everything I know about alcohol and you still choose to drink, then that's your decision and I respect that. If you're drinking because you're not aware of what it's doing to your body, then surely you want to know what you're putting inside yourself.
It's worth noting at this point, so I've said that me and Claire had you leading the way and to ask questions and to open up to. So you didn't have anybody physically in real life to speak to that, you know. You were just listening to podcasts. And had you listened to podcasts before that point much, or?
Never.
I mean, that's what makes it quite remarkable. You spontaneously did this without any person-to-person support.
Yeah, I had nothing really. And looking back, I don't know how I did, because I didn't even talk to my husband. Like, if my husband listened to this podcast, he'd be like, I didn't know she felt like that. I didn't know that went through her head, because I didn't really talk to anybody about it. It was very much a personal journey in terms of my feelings and my emotions. But outwardly, I was this, I'm not drinking, don't talk to me about it, don't question it. But the problem was, because I was so brazen about it and because I was so strong-minded about it, I met resilience, because people saw it as an attack on their decision-making. They were like, whoa, that's my best friend you are dissing right now. How dare you say that about them? And I had a lot of people question me. I got into quite a few heated arguments with people that, you know, I'm really close with.
Because it just doesn't make any sense to someone who drinks regularly and is supported by society and culture to continue doing so, and in a year on the back of COVID and on the run up to Christmas where it is entirely still normalised, I imagine, in your circles, then it is horribly uncomfortable to have somebody lifting up a mirror and showing the facts. I remember how uncomfortable that is to have somebody, and sometimes not even saying or doing anything, but just knowing that that person was able to not drink can be really irritating. And you think, it doesn't make sense, I don't get it.
Yeah, and I think that...
I mean, how do you react with that?
It was hard. It was really, really hard. And I remember somebody saying to me, oh my God, you're brainwashed. You are brainwashed. I mean, what a term. And I turned around to them and I said, no, you are brainwashed. I'm making an informed decision for my body. You believe that this is safe to use. What really upset me was hearing people say, well, why can't you moderate? Everything in moderation is fine. I even had someone say that to me this evening before I've done this podcast, genuinely. And I turned around to them and said, okay, would you go up to a heroin addict and say, listen, just have heroin of a weekend? Would you go up to somebody who wants Coke and just say, well, it's all right because it's Thursday night, so you can have Coke? There is absolutely no difference with alcohol. Alcohol is one of the most addictive drugs out there, and it's actually, if you Google the statistics, it's the biggest killer in terms of the drug world. It kills more than any other drug. There are more alcohol related drugs than any other one. So the fact, I find it insulting when somebody says, why don't you just moderate? Why don't you moderate your intake of poison?
Yeah, and it causes 7 types of cancer, doesn't it? And just like it,
Exactly.
I did not know it was so toxic, and that's one thing I just want to hope, and I imagine you're the same, to pass along to the next generation, just to have that knowledge in their pocket that you can't just go around smashing this stuff in left, right, and centre because it is dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I think back to all the funny, I'm saying that with little commas on my fingers, all the fun moments I had when I was younger. They're actually funny. What I thought was funny, but it's dangerous. They were just dangerous situations you put yourself in because you get this overconfident, oversharing, verbal diarrhea-ness that comes with alcohol. So, how did I do it? I use podcasts. I cannot recommend using this. Honestly, they're just such a good resource. Even if you're at the stage in your drinking where you haven't given up yet and you're just trying us on for size, you're in the right place. Just keep listening, keep tuning in, because something might just click for you where you're like, actually, I'm going to give this a little go. And most importantly, the one thing, if you take nothing away from this, is please don't listen in and think, oh my gosh, she's just admitted that she drank a bottle and a half of wine a night. I'm only having 3/4 to a bottle. I'm all right. The key thing here is, if you are worried about your drinking or you're uncomfortable with it, then absolutely go down this avenue of looking to, make a change in your life. There's no set limit. There's no threshold that you have to crash through to qualify to become sober.
I've read that. If it's a problem for you, it's a problem.
Exactly. So I use podcasts. If I showed you my Kindle, I read everything I could get my hands on. I love research anyway, but I read everything I could get my hands on. And, if you're looking for some books to recommend, I'm sure we'll do another podcast on this, but just quickly, Mrs. D's Going Without, Tired of Thinking About Drinking. A fantastic book, which I cannot recommend enough, is The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober. I used hypnosis. It's not for everybody, and I get that. I'm just going through the tools that I used. And that's it really, just shattering. I can't explain that enough, just shattering that illusion and researching exactly what alcohol does to your body and how bad it is for you. It just really made me change my mind. What I want to share with you now is the positives. I've gone through a lot of the negatives. For me, what I've gained from being sober is just amazing.
Just before you do, and maybe to bridge the gap between the negatives and the positives, as you ventured into the early weeks and then the early months of sobriety, did you come across triggering people, triggering moments, and how did you tackle those?
Do you know what it was for me? The biggest trigger. If somebody sent me a holiday clip and there was a glass of wine with a sea in the background, instantly I'd be like, oh, I want to drink that. But do you know what I had to tell myself is it really the alcohol I want from that picture? And I dissected a bit and be like, no, what I want from that picture is to be sat in the sun looking at that amazing view. Don't give the alcohol the gold star. Don't give it that sort of what's the word I'm looking for, Jane?
Power, authority.
Yeah, don't give it the power. Actually, the reason why you go out and have a good time is because you're out with people you love. You're out with people who make you laugh and make you feel good about yourself. You're in a social environment with all that sort of absorbing that atmosphere. Alcohol actually only detracts from that, because you're going to end up a slurring, can't walk, stumbling mess at the end of it and can't remember half the night. So don't give it that prestigious pedestal to stand on, because alcohol's not the reason you're having a good time. The reason you're having a good time is you're out with mates.
But what about events like maybe birthdays or New Year's Eve or Tuesday wine club? I mean, that's gone by the side. What about like actual events or people perhaps even that would trigger you, that would just make you stop and think? Did you just pull those thoughts out into the open, analyse them and package them back down, have a word with yourself?
I had a resource bank, and my resource bank was when I went to people's houses that I'd be triggered by or events, I made sure I had a nice drink. I went out and I bought myself beautiful glasses. I bought myself lots of gorgeous flavoured tonics and kombucha. I bought myself posh cordials. I even had frozen berries in the freezer, which I could sort of decorate my glass with, and it made me feel as if I was having an adult drink. And I needed that. I don't really use that now, but certainly I'd say for the first year, I needed that resource bank. I needed to think, I'm not going to sit here with a blackcurrant cordial. I need a posh drink. Yeah, so the benefits. I feel genuinely like I've got so much more energy. You know, I work hard and I train hard. I do a lot of exercise. I compete in triathlons, and I can do both. I, run a household. I go to work, and I don't seem to get that tired, which is amazing. And it's because I sleep better. I haven't got that artificial stimulant pumping into my body, which, it's got the effect of sedating you initially, so you feel sleepy, but then the stimulant kicks in after, which gets your heart racing, which is why you wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning, quite often looking for a drink because you're so dehydrated. I don't have that anymore. I sleep a lot more soundly. Obviously got more money because I'm not spending it on alcohol. I found I'm more patient with the kids, and the guilt's gone. I remember there was times when they'd asked to play and I was just like, oh God, I really don't want to do that. And I'd do it like half-heartedly. Now, if somebody asks me to do something and I don't want to do it, I own that. And I'm like, I'm making a conscious decision that I don't want to do that. And there's no guilt. Every time I was incapable of doing something, I blamed the alcohol, and then I'd feel guilty because it's the alcohol. Whereas now I'm just like, no, I just don't want to do that. I'm up quite early nowadays. I'm up normally between 6:30 and 7:30, which I know for you, Jane, you still like your lies in. Is that a time? I think for you, even if you lie in now, you're lying in because you want to, not because you have to.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, the anxiety has been lifted a lot. And do you know what? When I've had thoughts that I'm uncomfortable with, I've been able to process them better. I've been able to think them through logically, and really live those feelings. And I feel I've got over things quicker because I'm not drinking to hide those feelings. I'm facing them, which is scary for some people, and I get that. So yeah, no hangover, and oh my gosh, this is the best feeling. And the whole pink cloud concept, if you've heard of it, I absolutely lived that for a year. I would wake up every single morning, look out the window and take a deep breath and be like, I'm not hungover today. And I was elated. I was absolutely elated that I woke up and I felt physically fit and physically well. It was just a joy. That feeling
is amazing. I get that if I drive, if I've sober driven and I've dropped people off and I've come home at like 2 a.m, it's like a euphoria.
It really is. And like for me, in the back of my head, I've always thought this is my life forever, but I've always been scared to say that. I always say, well, no one ever asks me, but in my head, I'm just like, if anybody does ask me, I always say, one day at a time and whatnot. But I knew the minimum I wanted to do was 3 months, because I knew at 3 months my liver would be completely healed, completely regenerated and healthy. And that was my absolute sort of gold stamp at the end of the 3 months, which by that point, all the withdrawals gone, all the addictive feelings have gone, and it's so much easier. I felt really motivated. I hit the ground running in my job. I went in every day. I was hot on it, still am, just feeling like I've just got it together. I just know where my life is going a bit more. I spent a lot of time worrying about myself. I was Googling and wanting blood tests for somebody to say, you are not allowed to drink. Going back to that whole pregnancy thing, somebody told me I couldn't drink, so I didn't drink. I needed someone to tell me I couldn't drink to give up, which is ridiculous. I did it for myself in the end. No one told me to, but initially I was looking for that. My physical health has improved massively. I've improved in my triathlon times, sometimes by 3 or 4 minutes in a race, which is just amazing.
You're reverse aging.
My face doesn't look like I am, but yeah, I feel like my body is. And people often have these worries. I won't be able to dance sober. I went out and did karaoke 2 weeks ago, which I never, ever, ever thought I'd do, but I did, and I did it sober. I had an alcohol-free beer, and I thoroughly enjoyed my evening, and I left there feeling like I was absolutely buzzing. I feel stronger mentally because I've overcome something, and I don't feel embarrassed by that. When people say, why did you give up? I don't make a stupid excuse. I literally just say, I stopped enjoying drinking. And the crux of it is, I stopped enjoying it. I stopped getting joy out of it. And there's just no looking back now. Like, I've got diary entries. Here's this one. This is just 10 weeks in. So if you're not even on day 0 now, even just a few days in, you will feel the benefits, I assure you. Wow, over 10 weeks in, I've never felt better. My sleeping pattern's great. I have bags of energy. My skin looks better because I had rosacea. That's more or less gone. My mood is more stable. I have patience. I feel motivated to get things done. And I've put to myself, well done, keep it up, don't go back.
That's self-care. That's an example of self-care, which, perhaps when people are drinking is lacking for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting you wrote your stuff down, like pen and paper there. I joined on a little forum and was keeping a bit of a daily diary entry electronically, which, again, I'm really pleased that I did because I've got access to that. And it's nice to be able to keep that for yourself because you're making that for yourself. I've got a question for you. Mm-hmm. So I know you to be someone who has influenced at least 3 people that I know of anyway to then go ahead as well and in their own time get sober. So obviously me and Claire thrown in there and another person, a family member. So that's 3 people in the space of 2 years or so. I mean, what does that feel like to know that by you sticking to something you were doing for yourself, that it's had this kind of ripple effect on people around you? I mean, that's got to be remarkable.
You made me well up then. I didn't think I'd cry on this podcast. I really didn't. But just hearing you say it like that, it's...
That you've been a trailblazer. You, without anybody around you, managed to tackle this, make it happen, cause a conversation around it, normalise it within your family group, and by doing that, enabled other people to sort of jump on and begin normalising it themselves too. And that's an incredible effect on just, a relatively small group of people to have that kind of an influence. I mean, and I guess that comes down to entirely why we're setting up the podcast and you're the driving force behind it, because you just would want to continue spreading that, I suppose, and it just must feel amazing.
It really does. And I think, I never, when I gave up, I never intended to sort of force it on anybody, which I didn't. I just sort of, I suppose, inspired really, and to think that you and Claire have made that change because of my influence really is just... It's so heartwarming, and I feel so proud of you both because I can see how content and how happy you are having made that change, and it just makes me so happy. And to think that we may be able to help other people there could be someone sat at home tonight with a glass of wine in their hand, listening to this podcast. But in a few days' time, that might be their day one, and we've had a part to play in that. And it just makes me feel so good to be able to pass this and pay it forward. And what's lovely is I've inspired sort of 3 people, but then Claire's gone on to say that there's quite a few people in her life who she's then inspired. And I know you, Jane, there's a couple of people who have, you've spoke to that feel quite inspired by you as well. And it's just that paying it forward, and it's really, really exciting. And I just want to read this to you. This was my diary entry at 2 years. This evening 2 years ago, I remember drinking a bottle of wine, possibly slightly more, and thinking, I'm not even enjoying this. I waited for the buzz. It never came. I waited for the wave of relaxation. It never came. All the positives of the glass of wine I used to enjoy had faded away, and all I was left with was anxiety, anguish, and low self-esteem. I remember that evening well, because I thought to myself while staring at the musty-coloured poison, this is the last day I'll let you ruin my body. 2 years on, I feel so healthy and content. Never look back. Keep it up.
It's quite poetic.
And I really meant it. Like, I'm nearly 3 years on, and I'm still so proud of the journey I've been on, and I still get a buzz out of not drinking. When somebody offers me a glass of wine, I am so incredibly proud to say, no thank you, I don't drink.
Yeah, just those words, it's enough without having to embellish or add anything else to it, really. And then I suppose if somebody asks you, then you're happy to go down that route.
If anybody acts uncomfortable around you not drinking, please don't take that personal. That is purely a reflection of how they're feeling.
It really is.
It really is.
Having been that person with those feelings, it's definitely because that person is probably questioning the role of alcohol in their own lives and is uncomfortable and not quite knowing where that's going. And if somebody's there pointing out, holding up that mirror and saying, it's really not a great substance to be ingesting, it's really uncomfortable. So I think that's a really, really important tip. As you say, if you are met with resistance or questions, then perhaps it just isn't, it's not you, it's other people. And
just own it, because you never know where that's going to lead. I had somebody approach me in the summer, a person I've only met once or twice, and he had asked me about me not drinking, never, ever, ever mentioned anything about his feelings. And I saw him a year after I'd seen him last. I don't know this person very well. And he was like, Ruth, can I just tell you, I haven't had a drink for, I think it was like nearly 3 months at that point. I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I said, what's brought this on? He was like, I don't know. He said, that conversation's never left me. He was like, asking you about your journey, I was really intrigued, and I think it's good to be intrigued. So if people ask you questions, don't see it as an attack. See it as, this person's sober curious. Yeah.
Oh, so we'll raise your tally now to 4 people.
Yeah. So yeah, just own that and never see it as a personal attack. Just think, actually, this person could be sober curious, and if they want to know more, then be happy to speak to them about it.
But yeah, you do you. You have control over what decisions you make in your own life. And if you want to explore a more sober lifestyle, it is going against the grain, but you're in charge of you.
There's so many people out there, working professionals, functioning people, who you could walk past down the street and look at them and think, my God, they've got it all. They've got the job, they've got the family, they can drink responsibly, but you never know what's going through their mind. And yeah, just good luck, because honestly, the grass is actually greener.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Fizz Free from Ruth, Claire and Jane. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, the email is fizzfreezero@gmail.com. You can also find us online at Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. Don't forget to follow the show and please give us a great rating to help spread the word. Fizz Free, your relationship with alcohol, less fizz, more free.